We've all seen those cemeteries that could use a little or a lot of help. So many historic cemeteries become overgrown and unmaintained, vestiges of what they used to be. One such cemetery is the Thorntown Colored Cemetery, just outside of Thorntown, Indiana. Today, I'll be speaking with descendants of those buried there, researchers who found valuable information, and the Eagle Scout who helped bring it back to life. Shannon, can you tell me a little bit about the history of this cemetery?
Absolutely. Thorntown in the 1800s was a thriving community, had a very thriving Black community as well, and this was one of the pieces of the outreach the town did to them. One of the Cox family members sold the Black community this plot of land for $25 with the express written directions that it had to be used for a cemetery.
Okay. Now, how did these people come to be in Indiana?
We think three different ways. One, their former masters brought them here. They had had enough of slavery in the South. They brought them here to free them. Or they wandered in, as Charles Derrickson did, or they were free to begin with.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the Thorntown community?
Thorntown community was Quaker-based. A lot of Quaker roots are here. Very progressive area at the time. Lots of businesses, progressive ideas, and the Black Thorntown community had four main things to their credit. They had a Black Masonic Lodge, they had a church, they had a school, and then they had the cemetery.
Can you tell me a little bit about the families that are buried here?
We believe there were several families here. The Shad family was one of the major ones. One of the Shad family members was actually a Civil War veteran. There are several Derrickson family members out here as well, also one of them a Civil War veteran. And then we've been able to piece together some of the stories. They all seem to have been connected at some point at the family level.
Okay. So what did this cemetery look like before?
When I first came here several years ago, there was no black fence. There were tree branches everywhere. There were maybe one or two monuments that we were able to find. The grass was sort of cut, but luckily the farmer who owns this property was able to save it. All these accoutrements and changes were because of Reese Thompson.
Awesome. He did a really good job.
He did a fabulous job. Saved a piece of history.
That's amazing. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for sharing this piece of history.
Hey, Reese.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Reese, can you tell me a little bit about how this project came to be?
Yeah, in 2016, I was searching for an Eagle Scout project, and I stumbled upon the Colored Cemetery. I knew I wanted to restore a cemetery, so it fit perfect for my Eagle Scout project. Found some funding, did some research about the cemetery, and made the project happen.
Very good. Can you tell me a little bit about your funding?
Yeah, so with my funding, it started off as a smaller project, so we raised about $1,800. Which gave us a GPR study through Ball State University, which is a ground penetrating radar study. Then we obtained the funds to upright headstones and reset them and clean them. And that was the completion of my Eagle Scout project. And then we moved to the next phase where we raised $15,000 from the Indiana Historical Society Heritage Grant sponsored by the Lilly Endowment. That allowed us to build a fence around the cemetery to prevent from farmer encroachment, as well as bring this sign to us.
Very good. Can you explain a little bit about the GPR?
Yeah, for the GPR study, it was conducted by Dr. Kevin Nolan from Ball State University. He had a machine that came and scanned the ground, and every point was flagged. So what we were looking for was any type of historical artifacts that might tell us more about the cemetery. So went through and dug up certain parts of the cemetery where the GPR study made an impact, and found different artifacts such as seashells, plates, and some rocks that we believe may be headstones.
Very cool. So what did this cemetery look like before you started your project?
Yeah, so when I first showed up, I got to the grounds and it was overrun, and it had one sign, which we later found out that was outdated. The headstones were turned over on their sides and some were partially buried underground, so I knew that had to change.
Well, it looks great now.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Now, did the ground penetrating radar also detect unmarked graves that were here?
That was the intent of the project, but unfortunately we did not find any.
Okay, and how many headstones are here total right now?
There are 3 headstones and 2 base stones, which at one time we think had a headstone on top of it.
Okay, and how many people do you think are buried here?
There are approximately, after my project, 48 people were found to be buried here.
How did you find those 48 people?
Through the ground penetrating radar study and also former historical studies done by Shannon Hudson.
That's amazing. Now, you got a grant through the Indiana Historical Society, is that right?
Yes, so we got a grant through the Indiana Historical Society called a Heritage Grant, sponsored by the Lilly Endowment.
Okay, and that's how we got this beautiful sign?
This sign and this fence for $15,000.
Wow, that's impressive. So who else helped you with this project?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the project, we actually assembled the Colored Cemetery Committee, which was brought together by Thorntown trustees, Laura Thompson, Boone County historian, Eric Spall, local teacher who knew a lot of history behind the cemetery, Shannon Hudson, as well as some others. And I really brought that group together because I knew I couldn't do this project alone, and as a young Eagle Scout, I had no idea coming into it, so it was some good guidance throughout the project.
That's amazing, and the community's been a great help as well?
Yes, a lot of donations from the community and a lot of support through media, and always questions to be answered.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Reese.
Yeah, thank you for coming out here and recognizing the project.
All right. So Erica, you are a descendant of some people who are buried here in this cemetery.
Yes, the Derricksons, Charles Derrickson and Matilda Derrickson, and there's one more.
Elijah.
Elijah Derrickson.
Okay.
Charles is my 3rd great-grandfather,
Okay.
and my mother was obviously is her great-grandfather, so great-great-grandfather, my 3rd great-grandfather.
Okay.
So,
And do we know anything about him?
we have a picture of him this is the only known photo that we have of
Okay.
him.
Shannon, have you done any research on the Derricksons?
We have, yeah. We found that in the 1840s, Charles wandered into this area. He never told us how we got here, and the Quakers were okay with that. He was adopted by the Quakers, he was taught to read, and they set him up in farming on the Darlington-Montgomery County line. Charles eventually told the residents that his wife Tilly was still in bondage in the Kentucky area. So the community bonded together to raise $450 to send to Tilly's owner. Tilly's owner agreed to the sale with the understanding that he would only ship her as far as Madison. Darlington Thorntown residents gathered together again, got her back up here from Madison, where she and Charles were officially married, and set up house. They were married over 60 years, had 16 children, 12 of whom descended or survived into adulthood. He was a very charismatic character. Charles was a self-ordained minister, and we know he kind of wandered back and forth from the area. There's a great legend that there was a calypso-type movement, rhythm song that he would tap to with his cane, and a Darlington resident by the name of Terry Bradshaw sent it to Hollywood. That song was adopted into Shirley Temple's dance on the stairs. So you can find that on YouTube.
Wow, that's amazing. What a character.
He was quite the character.
Now, Sean, I wanted to ask you, is there a certain part of Thorntown that the black people would have lived in?
Yes, there's a section called Bucktown down by the Thorntown School and the Thorntown Cemetery
Okay.
on the west end of town.
So even though the black people were here and the Quakers brought them here, they probably would have lived separately. Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. But I think it's super cool that people from the community rallied so much to bring Tilly here from Kentucky.
He did. Charles repaid the $450 by chopping wood for the Big Four Arch, or the Big Four Railroad,
Mm-hmm.
and lived happily ever after. He lived to about 106, Tilly lived to about 91. And we think both of them are here. And then there's Elisha Derrickson, who is Charles's brother, who we believe is a Civil War veteran.
Okay. Now, Sean, you've done some research at the Thorntown Library, right?
Yes, when I lived here and before I moved to Thorntown, briefly.
And what did you find out about the Derricksons?
There was a big family. They had a cabin right on the county line road, which I seen.
It's still there?
It's no longer there.
Okay.
My grandmother, which is Charles's great-great-grandfather, the owner who owned the land of where the cabin's at, one day called my grandma, offered a cabin. My grandma refused it. Thought it was too good to be true.
So she didn't take it.
She did not take it.
Okay. Shannon, do you have any other interesting stories about some of the people who might have lived here?
Well, first of all, we think there are two Civil War veterans here. One in the Shad family, and then Elisha Derrickson was also one. But there's one story that this makes me sad. Her name was Alice Mitchell. Alice Mitchell was murdered, we think, by her next door neighbor. There are four main characters. Alice, who was married to David. William and his wife lived next door. William apprenticed David, Alice's husband, in the barber shop. David comes home from the barber shop one day, can't find Alice. He finds her in William's backyard with half of her neck missing. Before she bleeds to death, she says that William is the one that shot her. Well, William goes on trial. William is found guilty. William is sent to Michigan State Penitentiary. On the way, he takes a razor blade out of his hair and tries to slice his neck. Well, he misses, and rather than the jugular vein, he cuts his vocal cords. So he spent some time in the Michigan State Penitentiary and is eventually shipped back here, where he was sent to the Lebanon jail and cared for by a Mrs. Titus, who we don't have any information about her. In the end, William blamed his wife because apparently William was making advances toward Alice and William's wife didn't like that. We will never know the full truth.
Wow, that is amazing.
A lot of drama.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you to Sean, Shannon, and Erica for being here today and telling me your stories.
Thank you so much for having us today.
I'm glad to do it.
Thank you for sharing the story.
All right, let's go.
All right.